Hey, how you guys doing? All right. I know I said that I would be chronicling this on a day-to-day basis. That's what I said at the start, and that was my initial intention. I thought to myself, well, I'll keep track as I go. Every 7 pages, I'll do a little video, see how it's going and whatever. But I thought about it and I realized there's really no point in doing this if I don't really have anything to say. And so finally, I have something to say. So what I have to say is that I've finally flown way past my initial watershed, my initial landmark in this book, which was 100 pages, roughly 100, 103 maybe, something like that. But that's as far as I'd ever gotten the other times that I tried to read it, and now finally I'm at like page 175 now, and so I've flown way past. So anyway, 175 pages, and I thought, okay, I'm way past the initial landmark, and it's a good time to kind of reflect on the book and on the experience so far. I thought that's how I'll do it, and I will then continue to do this whenever it turns out that I have something to say. So basically, here's what I have to say. I am enjoying the experience. Okay, that's the first thing I want to say. It's important to get that out of the way first. I'm enjoying the experience of doing this, even though it is not a very entertaining book. Okay, sorry, I don't find it very entertaining. It's not a page turner, is what I'm trying to say. This book is not a page turner, and I know maybe that's making me sound to fans of the book. I don't want to offend anyone, okay? I'm not saying it's a bad book. What I'm saying is that it is not a page turner. It is not entertaining. It is something where I have to read it with a lot of careful attention. It hasn't really sucked me in. And some people are probably saying, oh, this fucking guy, probably all he reads is airport books. And no, that's not true. Yes, of course, I do enjoy airport books, specifically when I'm on a long trip, a long plane trip. I do stop by Hudson News or whatever, and I do pick up a paperback that looks interesting because it will entertain me. So of course, Dan Brown, Dean Koontz. Yes, I do enjoy these books, but these aren't the only books that I enjoy. I enjoy all kinds of books, okay? I think the problem, basically, is that this is not really my genre. This is not really my thing. I don't want to say necessarily that I don't like sci-fi, because I do. But this is sci-fi, but it's also it's like sci-fi fantasy, right? I haven't been able to get through any of the Lord of the Rings books. I tried reading, I read The Hobbit when I was a kid, but my point is that, I tried, back when Peter Jackson's first Lord of the Rings movie came out, back in 2001, I went and saw the movie, and I loved it. So I thought, hey, maybe I should give these a try. The big books where you had Tolkien on the spine, and it was always very, growing up and stuff. It was never my thing, but I always saw those books at the library and whatever, and they seemed interesting. I just never got into them. But after the movie came out, since I'd really enjoyed the movie, I thought, well, you know what? Let me give this a try. And I tried reading, The Fellowship of the Ring, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Sorry, I couldn't do it. And so this is kind of along those lines. This is science fiction, but it's more. For instance, I'm not really a Star Wars guy either. It's not to say I don't like Star Wars. I do. I've enjoyed the movies. Some I like more than others. I watched the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. I thought that was pretty good. I tried watching a couple episodes of The Clone Wars. Didn't really do it for me. Sorry. I'll give it another chance at some point, but it just wouldn't suck me in. I'm more of a Star Trek guy. I'm a Star Trek guy. I think when it comes to science fiction, I like things that are grounded in a specific reality. So when you bring me something like this, which is kind of a combination of, there's a science fiction aspect to it, but it's also so steeped in its own sort of, it goes up its own ass a little bit. It's so steeped in its own dense mythology. It's not written in an entertaining way, is I guess what I'm trying to say. It's a science fiction adventure that's written like like a theological text or like a historical text. It's so I'm just saying it's not really my genre. There's an exception to this. I do like Stephen King's Dark Tower books. I do enjoy them, even though they kind of fall into this category of sort of gobbledygook, impenetrable, dense sci-fi in a certain way. But I think because Stephen King is tapping into certain genres that I do enjoy, so like it's a very unusual combination. The Dark Tower, there's an element of it where it's like a Western, but it's like a Western with aspects of medieval adventure, and then you stick in sci-fi and mysticism and all this stuff. It's like this mishmash that is actually pretty interesting and unlike anything else. So I do enjoy the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, and that's kind of an exception. But usually that kind of stuff doesn't grab me right away. I don't know. It's like I still haven't seen Game of Thrones. Okay, so there you go. I tried watching. I watched the first season of Game of Thrones, but so many characters, and it's just so there's so much going on. It's so dense. I could never get sucked into. I can only imagine what it must be like to actually read the books. I imagine they must be extremely dense and thick. All of which is to say, again, not a bad book, just not my genre. But let's now talk about why I am enjoying it. And I do think that if I'm somebody that prefers sci-fi like Star Trek, which, it's science fiction and it has its own sort of, it has its own nonsense, okay? It has its own sort of gibberish that they put there. But the concepts, like the general world is grounded in an identifiable reality. And so like I enjoy hard sci-fi stuff like that. When you're grounding it in an identifiable reality. I can say the same for the video game series Mass Effect. I think that's a work of science fiction that I really enjoy because, again, much like Star Trek, it is grounded in an identifiable reality. This is not. However, I do appreciate that even though this is fantasy, even though this is just like a fantasy in a certain way, of course it has concepts that are identifiable. Mainly the political concepts are identifiable. Now, I don't know anything about Frank Herbert's politics. I didn't do much research, okay, and I'm not going to. I'm just supposed to be reading this as a book, as a guy who's sitting down and reading a book. So I didn't do much research as far as like Frank Herbert's politics, and I'm not really somebody who is extremely well versed in the general geopolitics of the mid 1960s when this book was published. But I mean, I know general things, and I know that we were stuck like right in the middle of the Cold War in the mid 60s. And as I said before in previous segments, it's very clear that the villains are modeled in a certain way, at least their names and their otherness, let's say that. They seem to be modeled somewhat on the Russians, or at least that must be in Frank Herbert's headspace, that kind of the conflict, the Cold War conflict. Now, I'm not going to say that it's specifically that, but there is an aspect of, there's an aspect of the U.S. versus Russia in the Cold War. There is that aspect where I guess House of Atreides represents the U.S., the Harkonnens represents Russia. That's very superficial. It's a very superficial way of looking at it, and that's not really what I'm getting at. I think the most important thing, though, is that there is an aspect to this which I have found very compelling and very interesting, and that's that the central conflict here, we're 175 pages in. This is clearly what this book is about. But the central conflict here is essentially a territorial dispute, okay, between House of Atreides and House Harkonnen and, the planet Arrakis. It's a territorial dispute. It's a economic dispute because it has to do with the whole spice mining business and how they are, the Harkonnens have been occupying or have occupied, or this is how I understand it. The Harkonnens have occupied Arrakis at some point, and they are not well liked by the populace, by the people there, the Fremen. Okay, I think it's Fremen, or is it Freeman? I'm going to say Fremen. I don't remember the pronunciation from the David Lynch film. I'm going to just say Fremen. It seems like that's what they are. They were exploited by the Harkonnens, of course. The locals are the Fremen. And now here comes House of Atreides to kind of take over. And now what we see, the Duke Leto Atreides, he is really trying to make a difference. He's trying to show that he's not the Harkonnens, that House of Atreides, they're not going to exploit them. You see this conscious effort to be very, magnanimous, I guess. I don't know. The point is, they want to show that they, although they are in control, and although they are going to be handling things from a, let's say, administrative, managerial position, and yes, they're going to be controlling the situation, Duke Leto wants to make it very clear that they're not there to exploit them. I mean, this is what he presents superficially, right? But then when you get under it, you realize ultimately it's the same thing. It's a changing of the guard, but you're still talking about one power, okay, controlling versus another power, and it's still a situation where you have the people in power controlling the people who are not in power. And it doesn't matter who they are. It's a cliche, but meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And that's an aspect that I think is very interesting. Because although, yes, we are clearly demonizing the Harkonnens, they are clearly the villains of the piece, the House of Atreides are not without fault themselves. And so, just by virtue of the fact that they are in power, this makes them, on a certain level, themselves villainous, and that is a very intriguing idea, which I don't know if the book is really going to explore, because it seems like it's kind of exploring it, but I think it's exploring it in very superficial terms. But I like that that's there. I like that it's not just, House of Atreides are unimpeachable, they're wonderful, and the Harkonnens are the evil villains, and period. No, there's a little bit more going on. And it's ultimately still about this power struggle between Atreides, Harkonnens, and when this power struggle happens, the people below all this, the Fremen, the people of Arrakis, whoever wins, they still lose. And so I think that that's a very intriguing concept. Now, of course, added to that, the messianic narrative about, Paul Atreides and how he is he may be the Kwisatz Haderach. And that is a different thing, that is kind of the standard sort of hero's journey thing. Obviously, the story's building towards that. It's building towards Paul becoming the messianic hero, okay? And I think that I'm hoping that that we're going to go in that direction where Paul Atreides comes from the House of Atreides, and maybe as he comes of age and as he grows into his role or comes to discover his destiny, so to speak, he begins to see these cracks that I'm talking about, these political problems, these political contradictions. He begins to see them, and so his mission then becomes to actually really be a hero for the people of Arrakis. Really be a hero, a chosen one for the Fremen. And I think that that's a very interesting concept, which, I've seen the movies, so I know that they kind of go there. I know that they're going to go there. The story is constructed that way. But because this is the book, I feel it can go a little bit deeper, right? Than just a 2.5 hour movie. Where I am right now, this is what I'm seeing in the way this book is constructed, the way the story is constructed, and I'm kind of hoping that it starts to go in the direction that I'm seeing, because I think that That's a very interesting thing to explore that genre fiction doesn't always explore. And so I admire the book's complexity is what I'm trying to say. Even though, as I said at the start, I'm not finding this to be a very entertaining read. Like this is a chore. The experience of reading it is engaging. The ideas are engaging. The concepts are making me ponder aspects of political reality and social reality in ways that just a standard airport book, a shoot 'em up adventure story maybe would not have. So yes, I mean, I'm glad I'm doing this. I just, it's too bad that the way that it's written, I don't know if dry is the word, because it's not dry. There's a lot of character to this with all the gibberish. I think when Frank Herbert wrote this, he really wanted to communicate these complex ideas, and he tried to put them he put it into the shell of a science fiction adventure story, okay? But what he really wants to talk about are the ideas, the concepts, and I don't know, I guess maybe he couldn't quite find that balance. But then again, this is just me, because I know that this book, and it's a whole series of books, and before anybody asks, I have no plans to read the whole series of books. Just this one will do, thank you very much. This obviously has its fans, and they enjoy it, and they get sucked in. And so it's a little bit like what I was saying. Okay, that's fine. I mean, they enjoy it, and they get sucked in as well they should. Just like they get sucked into Star Wars and into the whole mythology of that. And yes, I know Star Wars is like a dumbed down version of this, but in any case, it has philosophy, it has all this mythology. I get that. I get why people like that stuff, and I always try to enjoy it on a superficial level. I can never completely get sucked in, So I guess when it comes to genre fiction, I'm always going to be more about stuff that is grounded, stuff that is recognizable. So, I prefer Star Trek to Star Wars. If I have to choose, Star Trek is going to win every time. Even though for many people Star Trek might not be as interesting. It doesn't have that mystical philosophy. It doesn't have. It has its own type of philosophy, but it's more like it's more about social commentary and concepts that are identifiable. My point is, if I had to choose, I stick with Star Trek. When it comes to the whole, George Lucas productions, growing up, I was always more of an Indiana Jones kid than a Star Wars kid. Again, Indiana Jones, although it explores mythology and it explores mystical things and supernatural things, it does so by tapping into historical reality. I don't know. I just prefer, an adventurer like Indiana Jones to, a guy holding a laser gun like Flash Gordon. I mean, that's just, when it comes to pulp, the type of pulp adventure that I prefer is more in the matinee serial about the adventurer, as opposed to the outer space stuff. I can enjoy space opera on a certain level, and yes, this is definitely space opera on its own level. I will always stick with the more grounded stuff, the more grounded aspects. So that's really what it comes to. So yeah, I am enjoying this. Okay, as I said, I'm 175 pages in, roughly. There's a lot more to go, because I'm going to be honest. Okay, I started out with the goal of 7 pages a day, and it was a busy month, and so I didn't actually read 7 pages a day, but I did try to catch up. Like if I missed a day, so the next day I'd try to read 15 pages and so on and so forth. So, I did what I could to get this far. There's about 380 pages or something left in the core narrative. So, yeah. I mean, I'll step it up a bit. Maybe I'll do more than 7 pages. Obviously, I'll do more than 7 pages at this point. I think I've decided to up my limit to double that. And I'm going to come back and reflect in a little bit, maybe a week or so. Basically, I think my next point will be once I've crossed the barrier, once I've gone into book 2, okay, because it's divided into 3 books, right? 3. So once I've gone into like book 2 or part 2 of the book, once I've gone there, I think it will be another point where I can sit down and reflect on how it's going so far. So I just want to reiterate, this is a good thing. I'm enjoying this book. I do like the ideas that it has. I like the relationships. I think the characters are intriguing. I just wish Frank Herbert had done it in a more entertaining way, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if it's the dialogue, that the dialogue's too florid. I don't know. You know, again, this is just big fantasy, a lot of all the writings that are referenced at the start of like a chapter or segment, they're all by the Princess Irulan, all of them so far, which I think is I mean, okay, but I think it's weird. I just like why they chose to do that. I understand the concept of you know, putting all these little excerpts from supposed historical writings from the world of Dune, but they're all from the same source, and I don't know. It seems a little lazy to me, but I'm nitpicking really. But I mean, it's not a problem. But yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying the experience. And I will definitely do this. I'll be back in a week or you know, I'll be back in about a week, I think, once I've crossed over into the threshold. Once I've crossed over into book 2, I will probably have more to reflect on where the story's going, and I'll be curious to see if any of what I'm talking about is really something that they start to explore on that level. So we'll see. So yeah, I mean, that's it for now. Hope you are enjoying these videos, and I'll see you next time.